senior leader, and welcome to the Talent Sherpa podcast. This is where senior leaders come to rethink how human capital really works. I'm your host, Jackson Lynch, and today I am joined by my co-host, Scott Morris. He's the founder of Propulsion AI. And today we're going to talk about something that's broken in almost every company we see: performance management. Specifically, we're calling out the outdated belief that performance is something that you review once a year. And we're going to make the case for turning it into an always-on operating system. Scott, I know that you're fired up on this topic. I guess let's lead with the easy question first. Why do companies still cling to that once-a-year performance review, and what does it cost them in your view?
Yeah, well, okay, let's deal with it in two parts. And I am fired up about this topic because this is one that if we get this right in an organization, the cascading positive impacts are massive. But here's what's wrong. One, the principles are wrong. Two, the mindset is wrong. Three, the approach is wrong. And four, I think in large case, the tool set is sometimes wrong. We're just thinking about the entire problem wrong. And I think one of the reasons that we continue to think about it wrong is that it feels like a massive shift to move this thing to where it needs to be.
You know, if you go back in time, we did everything on an annual cycle, and it has as much to do with where the planets are in relation to each other and the directional connection to the sun as it does anything inside the business. And so you end up having all these systems that are built around the agrarian calendar. But when we do that, we miss growth moments. We end up with outdated assessments with biases, recency, or halo effects or the like. And we end up not really understanding the key surprises that talent can provide for us. We miss them completely. So
this is where I'm talking about, like, I think a part of the principles are wrong. I think one of the principles that we've always held to, incorrectly in my opinion, is that talking about people's performance needs to be joined with giving them a pay increase. Now, obviously, there are connections between the two, but if the reason that we're doing one is the other, I think we start off immediately in the wrong direction.
Scott, tell me more on that, because I'm with you in terms of the decoupling from pay for performance, but moving upstream a little bit, like, is the principle of once a year the right time period?
Oh,
I don't think it is.
well,
Why would we even
yes, principle is the right word to use there, but this is both a principle and a mindset. Why is it that we are even commenting on people's performance? Why is it that the boss is saying anything? And I think back to this annual cycle, it's because right now it's because we have to do that in order to justify people's pay increases. And it's also why we do it once a year, because we're not adjusting pay along the way. But the right mindset should be about growth. I should be commenting about your performance, and I should be doing it on a regular basis because I'm trying to help you grow and improve. Theoretically, and I hope in practice, the boss is farther down the road than their direct reports in terms of what they've seen, what they've experienced, what they've done, how they've navigated, the mistakes they've made, etc. And there should be a benefit from that. There's also a coaching aspect. If I'm a manager who is coaching my team, think about a sports coach, right? The sports coach stands off to the side and says, "Hey, move your elbow in a little bit when you take that shot," right? What is the purpose of that? It's not just so that they can justify the salary. It's so that that individual can grow, they can become better, and the team becomes stronger as a result of it. So no, the annual cycle is not right. I think it exists largely for compensation purposes, but it's not just about decoupling. It's about shifting that mindset so that everything that we do around performance is about growth.
So if we were to do that, Scott, I would make the argument that you have to then tie the feedback loop to the actual pace of the business. And outside of an arbitrary set of numbers tied to external reporting, probably revenue, almost everything else internally is based on a cycle that moves way faster. And so by doing this on an annual basis, once the feedback is given, it's completely outdated. And let me lean into this even further. If you're looking and saying, well, we do mid-year reviews, candidly, we don't do those very well at all, do we? So does that actually solve the problem?
It doesn't, but that's why I say that the mindset is wrong. If you get the mindset right, you're going to get the tactics that go along with that mindset right. This needs to be about a conversation. You and I both know it. You and I have both done it, but most businesses just don't get it. We have 50, well, I was going to say 52, but we really don't have 52, but we have somewhere between 48 and 50 weekly opportunities with each one of our direct reports. What if that conversation was a small version of what we call a performance review? Wouldn't that be a better way to do it? Wouldn't it make it less of a production? Because the other issue that I have and why I'm fired up about this is we make this thing a huge production. And
Right.
we should be making it about small, quiet conversations where things aren't fatal flaws and we just are saying to the employee, hey, just pay more attention to this. Or, hey, you know what? You're showing up in a way that you might not want to show up. Or the opposite, which is keep doing this. You are doing great at that. Let me see more of this. That's the kind of feedback that most employees want.
And I think that if we were to follow that approach, that is how you make it look more like a business critical system than a once a year form. I'm with you. I
100%.
think it might be. I think I'm with you. I think it might, in fact, be because of the tie to compensation. I think there is a tie to legal defensibility as well that's in there. Neither of those two things drive increased outcomes.
But I
So
think you can have both and though, Jack. I think we don't have to totally discouple. And I've tried that too. I have tried to decouple completely the performance eval from comp, and it doesn't work because what we're trying to build theoretically, at least I know you and I agree about this, is we want a meritocracy. We want those people whose performance is off the charts to get big pay increases for what they've done. And if we completely decouple, I think we're swinging the pendulum too far to the other side. But I think you can have both at once.
yeah, Scott, I'm not suggesting at all that you decouple meritocracy and big raises from everything else. What I'm suggesting is that even the annual compensation review doesn't make any sense to me. So
Hmm.
if you are, let's say we have a 1 through 5 system, and then let's also then take out the fives and the ones because we almost never use them. So we have a 3 prong system, kind of a 2, 3, 4, and we try to come up with all sorts of neat ways of calling them 2, 3, and 4, so that people feel better about it. But at the end of the day, everyone can read through. Meets expectations is still a 3, and people get mad at it because that's where most people are. I would make the argument that if you are really running a pay for performance system, you are not only looking at the quantum of the increases, but the timing of it. And so if you are a top performer, you should get more raises, larger raises faster, perhaps tied to the completion of certain milestones that are not tied to the agrarian calendar. And if you are a meet performance type of employee, perhaps you don't get one every 12 months. You get one every 18 months, every 24 months. And if you kind of think through how we would design something that meets the following criteria, that it ties to the business cycle, it over rewards and differentiates performance, and is done in a way that allows you to be very focused and on growing your people, uh, then we would design a system that looks nothing like what we have today. And if you were to go back, there has been research done into this. Performance ratings do matter. So I don't want to take that and push it to the side. During the early 2020s, we had a whole bunch of companies that decided I was going to experiment without of life without a performance review and rating. They have almost all gone back, and they almost all went back because business performance suffered. Why? Because you know who really likes performance reviews, the or performance ratings, the people who get good ratings. And so we are always in this dynamic of I'm going to have a conversation with somebody in a world where I have limited resources. I'm always going to have a tough conversation with somebody. I want to have that tough conversation with a person that is not performing as well. I want to have the really easy conversation with the one that's knocking it out of the park. And our existing systems really invert that to a degree that I just don't understand.
Well, let me give you a stat because you know how much I like stats and research. According to McKinsey and Company, organizations that have robust performance management systems are 4.2 times more likely to outperform their peers and report 30% higher revenue and 5% lower attrition. So I think that supports this notion that people really want this. Businesses outperform when they have it. Let me ask you to weigh in on this. The rating system, I can't find anything that either supports or refutes my point of view, but I think the rating system is really constructed so we can compare one employee to another. When in reality, I think there's an argument to be made that we should be comparing the standard that we set up in performance planning for to what the employee actually performed on. Did you actually get to the results that we said you were going to get to? Did you show up with the behaviors we said you were going to work on? That should be the real question. And I think when we do that, employees perceive growth. And we know from work that LinkedIn did, 94% of employees said that they would stay longer with an organization if they could really truly perceive an intent to grow them.
I think an interesting approach to how to draw those two things together might be thinking about what is our normal business operating rhythm. Most companies I've worked with over the last decade do quarterly business reviews. Why don't we do quarterly performance reviews or more frequently? And the answer is because we've created this grand administrivia that takes people away from what they think their real job is to write a whole bunch of stuff down. They don't do it very well to begin with. They don't spend the time on it that you would hope to. And now ChatGPT does it for them.
Yeah.
And yet we're in this world where because of the administrivia, we don't do what we normally would recognize as better. We review every other part of the business there. Why wouldn't we review our talent at the same time? And in doing so, it shifts our focus from kind of rating people, which is what happens when you do it once a year, to coaching results, which is what should be happening on an ongoing basis.
I think you are spot on about that. And now, if I can weave in the point I was trying to make earlier about 48 to 50 opportunities, what if every week I sat down with my direct reports and I had a conversation that sounded something like this? We agreed that you would get these results by the end of the year. How are you doing? Where are you moving? Right? Are we seeing the trend go in the right direction? So if I'm a chief people officer and my KPI and my target result is to move ENPS from 50 to 65, and I have 12 months to do that, then every week we should be investing in some kind of activities. And quarterly, we should be able to see some kind of movement. And annually, I should either get to that or not get to that result. But it's unreasonable to think we're going to wait all the way to the fourth quarter or the fourth quarter of whatever the measurement is and expect some hockey stick outcome. So instead, what if my boss and I sat down and we said, look, this is where we're trying to get. What did you do this week to advance it? Did we see it in the numbers? Is it reasonable that we saw it in the numbers or not? And that's the first part of my one-on-one conversation. The second part is, hey, like we agreed, these are some competency areas where you do really well, and these are some competency areas where you need to improve. And let's talk about what you did this week to work on that. And let's talk about what I can do as your boss to help you with that. Right? Let's talk about projects. What else do we need to talk about? How can I help you? And how's your life? And what if that was the weekly conversation? And I mean, I think here's structurally, and here's from a tool set standpoint, a problem is we don't have really good ways of capturing all of that. But if we did, imagine summing up 13 of those conversations and then writing a narrative report about it. And what if that became your quarterly review? That would be an infinitely better system than we have today and not that much harder to execute.
So let me build onto that idea. And the good news is we don't have to come up with the solution here. I think there's at least one that's out in the market and has been ever since Mark Efron put his one-page talent management system out there as a book. If you haven't read it, you should go read it. It's science and simplicity. It's really, really good stuff. And what he would suggest, and I'll butcher it a little bit, is a 2x2x1. Let's talk about two things that are going really well, two things that are going not as well that you need some improvement in, and then the big question: what do I need to do to get stuff out of your way? And if you had 15 minutes of those conversations with your direct reports on a weekly basis, then the question becomes: how do you synthesize that into the performance review? Well, if you are doing things in Zoom, now you can record those conversations. and you can take the transcript and you put all the transcripts into your LLM, and you push a button and pop it comes. I think I'm coming up with a new business idea, and it pops out, and now you have a summary of the things that you've talked to, and where you have trends that have not turned around, and where you have feedback that continues to be um, reinforced. You also have the ability as a manager of a manager to determine whether or not this person is doing a very, very good job at it. And I've added no friction to any of my processes, and I'm tying it closer to the timing of the business. I'm giving them a tool. I'm giving them a tool that will allow them to just have a conversation. The other way you do it is you send out pulse surveys once a week, and the only question is, did you have a meaningful performance discussion with your supervisor? Yes or no?
Yeah.
And then you track that. It doesn't really matter who it is or where it is. That becomes a macro measure that you can really reinforce.
Well,
It's
that's an
now
and. That's an and, not an or. We should be
no
doing
doubt.
both of what you just suggested.
No doubt, because what we're doing now is just documentation theater. It's documentation. We don't focus on the business impact. We focus in on saying the least amount that we can get away with without HR getting mad at us. And I can't if I were to look at 5 performance reviews in most companies that I've stepped into, I couldn't tell you who the good performer is from the bad performer,
Yeah.
because they all read the same. And I'm sure that we have people on listening to the podcast that are saying, well, in my company, we do a better job of that. I ask you to randomly go pull 5 reviews. And if you can really tell in rank order 1 through 5, please DM me. I'd like to have you on the pod, and we can talk about how you did it, because I've not seen it before.
Well, and you know what Gallup says? 2% of CHROs think that their performance management system actually works. So I completely challenge. If somebody says they think they're doing it right, I completely challenge that. I don't think we're going to get any takers on the offer that you just put out there.
So let me then ask you this, Scott. With all that in, why is it that senior leaders pretend that their performance management system works?
Because it's all they've got. Because they've only known it the way that they did it, and the way that their boss did it, and the way that their company did it. It's all they've known. And they're missing one key element, Jackson, and you and I talk about it a lot on this show. It's the role design up front. If I haven't sat down, in fact, I get asked, like every year I think that I spent as a CHRO, I got asked the question, how can I make my performance review go well? And nobody liked my answer, because I would say, well, what goals did you outline at the very beginning? What success measures did you establish? How were they connected to the outcomes, and how did those outcomes connect to strategy? And they said, well, I don't really have that, but I want to figure out how to get through, the conversation. And my answer, and this is what nobody liked, was you can't. You cannot put lipstick on that pig, but you can fix the situation. The way that you do it is by starting. Everybody thinks about performance reviews as the end is where you have the success. But the reality is it's the beginning is where you have success. And to directly answer the question that you're asking, most people think their system works because they are in a battle of words. What they should be doing is thinking about, how am I going to establish the criteria that are objective, that the individual wants to manage, and I am going to help them see through. That's my job. My job isn't to manage their performance. Their job is to manage their performance. My job is to stand back and point out the places that if they made little small shifts, their performance would improve. That's not managing their performance. That's on them. My job is establishing the criteria. That's what a good boss does. But that's the piece that we're missing. We miss it in the role design.
18 minutes. That's a new record for how long we've been able to make it into a podcast without talking about the upfront role design and the focus on outcomes. So congratulations, Scott.
Thank you. I couldn't resist it, because it's the truth.
It is the truth. It's new. We're reaching new peaks. And let me be even more provocative than that. I'm going to make 2 arguments, and I'd like you to take a shot at either of them if you think I'm wrong. Number 1, when we have an employee who's not performing, we default that it is a personal problem and a motivational problem. And I would argue that poor performance usually signals a system failure, not a talent gap. What do you think?
Oh gosh, I'm with you. And the thing I think is funny is if we want to do a sports analogy, and I know you and I are both big sports fans, right? When a sports team doesn't perform, who gets blamed? Who gets fired? It's
The
not the
coach.
player. It's the coach, right? But in business, we start writing these things off to it's that person's problem. I think it's a mistake. Management owns the system. If the employee isn't acting on the system, that's on the employee. If they act on the system and don't get the right result, that's usually on us as managers.
Yeah. The second provocative thing I would tell you is I think feedback avoidance is just it's a rampant epidemic. Silence is in fact the norm, and we end up justifying it to ourselves. That by not giving people that feedback dense, inclusive of things that they can be doing better, that we are keeping people comfortable, and we won't have the turnover that would otherwise be there. And I push back on that. I think avoiding tough conversations, it kills momentum. It creates the quiet quitting, and I'm old enough to remember when that was called slacking. It creates that. High performers, I think, leave not because of feedback; they leave because they don't get any. Ultimately, this is a managerial behavior. It is something that leaders have to be trained in. They have to be held accountable for that feedback. If we look at a manager job design, one of the outcomes has got to be that their employees get good understanding of what's expected of them, regular and timely feedback, and that they apply consequences, both good and bad, to reinforce whatever feedback that they're giving over time within whatever system that they have. The development of people is a hands-on sport. It is a leadership sport, and I just don't think, broadly speaking, I've seen us do a great job anywhere I've ever been of holding managers accountable for that. And that includes Frito-Lay in the PepsiCo world, which is, I would argue, the gold standard of it. They do it better, but no one does that well. And we now have tools that allow us to do things a little faster. So my question is just trying to bring this back and being very, very pragmatic in what we can do. Scott, if you're talking to a CHRO or an executive today, what would you suggest they start doing on tomorrow morning to rewire their performance?
Yeah, so I think this comes back to a structural problem. And the first thing I would lead with is the why. And to add some support to a point you made just a moment ago, 85% of employees would consider quitting after what they perceive to be an unfair performance review. So the question, the why, how do we get people to perceive that it's fair? Go back to the weekly meeting. In a weekly meeting, you get something that you don't get in a quarterly, that you don't get in a semi-annual, and you don't get in an annual review. And it's the opportunity to say, hey, I need you to pay attention to this. It's not a fatal flaw right now. Nobody's going to kill you for this one, but you've got to start paying attention to this, because if you don't, it's going to become a problem. You do better, Jack, with tough feedback than a lot of people that I know. In fact, I'm going to go out on a limb and say most people. Your training at Frito-Lay Pepsi really showed in how you handle yourself, even in just regular conversations. You are hard on problems, soft on people. You do a great job with that. The cool thing about really having an honest conversation on a weekly basis is that it gets a lot easier to deliver harder messages because they're not urgent. When you pull the urgency out, and that's the thing I would tell a young CHRO, construct a situation where it's not vomiting on the employee, meaning here's the list of all of the things that you're not doing well, and where the urgency is out of it. Like, if you don't fix this now, I'm going to have to put you on a performance review. Why do we wait that long? Small conversations, 48 to 50 a year, give you the opportunity to fix that in not a heavy lift.
I think you've hit a couple things. One, you got to tie it into the business rhythm. You can't tie it into the calendar cycles. I think you also talked about creating a weekly pulse feedback, which is way more simple and way more impactful. And if you're a manager, and let's say you have 12 direct reports, which is, I think, 12 to 15 is average for frontline. It's going to be less with more senior leaders. 15 minutes times 12 people real quick, that feels like 3 hours in the course of a week. Tell me where you will have a higher ROI investment than those 3 hours if you are doing that religiously. And it's not a checklist item. It's literally the 2x2x1. Um, but what else do you think we do, Scott, with if I'm talking to a brand new CHRO, what other suggestions would we have for things they can do right away to start making things better?
Yeah, I mean, I think your idea about utilizing the transcripts to take notes. I think one thing back to the statistic about 85% of individuals quitting or considering quitting after what they consider to be an unfair performance review. What's going to make things be perceived as more fair? One is you talk early. Two is you talk often. Three is you confirm understanding. So to your point about feeding back, like whatever the notes are out of that meeting, however you can synthesize them, and there are plenty of tools that do that right now, feed those notes back and say, hey, look, here's what we talked about. Here's what we heard. Because the last thing you want the employee to do is feel like they're being surprised by something. But imagine this. 48 conversations and there's repeating themes, right? And the employee keeps hearing those themes. Now, I'm a theory Y guy. I think people show up in order, like they want to perform. And so I think if we give them that repeated feedback, they're going to use that repeated feedback. At least that's what I believe and what I've seen in organizations. So I think, frequency and repetition is another thing I would say to CHROs. Make sure that managers understand you can't just say it once. You've got to say it over and over and over again until you start to see movement in the direction that you want.
If you want to make a lawyer mad, have them listen to the last 15 minutes of this podcast, because it will blow up all of their concerns about fairness and documentation, and we're going to get sued and everything else. I have a different take, and that different take is if you are having regular conversations and you will have fewer people that feel like they're being treated unfair, to your point. But that also doesn't mean you don't write stuff down. But there is a moment where you start to write that down, and that is when the manager has had sufficient conversations without progress. And then you start writing that down. We, as a series of HR people, and I wrote about this, I don't know, in late July, early August, I can't remember, that we end up really building our systems around the 5%, not the 95%. And the 95% want to come in and do a good job. They're going to give it their all. They're going to give you the discretionary effort. They're going to do all of the things that you want them to do. And what do our policies do? They focus on the 5%. And this, I think, is an example. So,
Well,
performance reality check.
I don't know where we are on from a time standpoint, but another subject that you and I talk about all the time is the mindset problem that we have in HR. Our focus as HR leaders should be business productivity. It should not. I mean, there's a risk management component that the business has to worry about. But if the profession of HR is about risk management, then I think we're starting off again, headed off in the wrong direction. And if my documentation system is, hey, look, the first thing we're going to do is agree about what we're going to do. The second thing we're going to do is talk about it pretty regularly. If I don't see progress in the direction that we need to go, that we agreed that we were going to go, I'm going to start to send you notes about it, which is a form of documentation. And if I still don't see what I want, then I'm going to do something a little bit more formal. Why is that a problem? I don't think lawyers are going to hate that. I think that's a system that I know I've used, and I'm pretty confident you've used, although we haven't talked about it. But it satisfies all of the things, including risk management.
So you asked about where we are on time. I think that is a great podcast episode that we'll do in the future, but we are at right about the 28-minute mark. So let me leave you with this one big takeaway when discussing the entirety of the performance management discussion. Here's what I leave you with. If it doesn't make your talent better or your company stronger, you should stop doing. So thank you so much for tuning into the Talent Triple podcast. This, again, is where senior leaders go to rethink how human capital really works. And I want to give a quick shout out to one of our favorite listeners. Hi, Shiva. Thank you for being a part of the Talent Sherpa community. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please hit the like button, the subscribe button, leave a review on your favorite platform, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. If you don't want to give us a 5-star review or say something mean about Scott, please don't do it. It hurts his feelings. But if you are a CHRO who's wondering where to start your AI journey, please check out Propulsion AI at www.getpropulsion.ai. That's transforming how smart companies turn HR insights into powerful outcomes.
And if you are an emerging or a brand new CHRO and you are ready to accelerate your impact, head on over to the Substack at talentsherpa.substack.com or mytalentsherpa.com. We've got resources that are designed specifically to help you navigate, elevate, and deliver results from day one.
That's true. So until next time, keep challenging the status quo, keep driving outcomes, and keep on climbing.